Hello, and you're very welcome back to the Public Eye Business Podcast brought to you by Granite Exchange. I'm your host, Sarah Travers, and in this special 5-part series, we're taking a deep dive into the world of employee ownership trusts. We'll be exploring exactly what that is. We'll be hearing from businesses that have successfully made the transition, and we'll be talking with those considering this model for their own companies. We'll also provide valuable insights from legal and accounting experts. And plus, we're really excited to feature a special guest later in the series from a prominent member of the Northern Ireland Executive to discuss how they're supporting employee ownership, and we'll find out what resources are available to businesses. So do join us as we uncover the potential of this transformative approach. Now, on today's episode, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Jonathan McKeown, founder and chairman of JMK Solicitors and Granite Legal Services, CEO of Crash Services and founder of Granite Exchange. Alongside him is Gervase McGenity, Director of Business Law in Granite Legal Services. Gents, you're very, very welcome to your own studio, really, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Nice to be back.
Yeah, it is nice to have you both back. But as we've been doing during this really special series that we've been bringing people, we're talking all about the topic of employee ownership. And we've had some fascinating discussions around what that actually means and its future in Northern Ireland. But Jonathan, the reason you're here today is I understand that you're interested in exploring the transition of JMK Solicitors to an employee ownership trust. So I'd love to know where you are on that journey and why you think this is the way forward.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. I think that where it got me most in relation to this is the idea that a lot of people talk about their businesses in terms of employees or our greatest assets. And then the employees come in one day and find out that the business has been sold, and they suddenly have a new owner without any consultation or otherwise. And I've felt that with JMK over the years, it's now a business with nearly 50 solicitors in it. We started with just myself in 2003, and 21 years later, we're quite a large legal practice. And for a number of years, the solicitors in the business are the front of the business. They are who the clients contact rather than myself, and I think it's my own sense of responsibility to the staff that I wouldn't want them to come in one day and the business be sold out from under them. I'd want them to know that I genuinely felt that they were our greatest asset.
And you've always been very forward thinking when it comes to looking after your employees. I mean, I've met many of your staff members, and they absolutely own the business already, don't they?
Well, exactly. That would be my, I suppose, prime motivator in this is that they already act that way. So you might as well put it on to them and say, right, that's okay. You joined me on the mission and have a vision for this business. And because you got on board in that journey, well, it's time to reward you, that you already have got so much of it. Other than the piece of paper, if you like, they're already doing a lot of it. But there is also a lot of the ownership responsibilities of a business that they don't have. And I do think that over the years, some of them have been yearning for that. They're very competent at their job, but actually they really would like to have the extra skills of managing a business, whether that is thinking about finance, thinking about HR matters, or the general strategy of where the business is going to go, introducing legal technology, for example, things like that to automate their jobs, that if they've got a stronger voice and lead in introducing these new initiatives in the business, then they will do it on the basis they're getting the actual upside rather than it all, accruing to me and the other partners. That's kind of my thought, and the other partners in the same vein as myself is that we understand that the business only exists because of the work that those solicitors do, and we are selling solicitors' time effectively in our business. So it would be a bit rich for me to come and say to them one day, oh yeah, someone else is now now your boss, and when that's not the dream that I sold them on. I sold them on we are part of a collective, and that I would look after them, and we've done that really well. And that's the thing, when you
start to build a business and you start out, you're not thinking of your exit. Well, most people aren't. They're starting out. It's a new adventure, but then you do reach a stage in your life and you go, crikey, how do I get out of this? And, what's next for what I've built?
Yes, well, that's the other thing. I suppose I was 50 this year. I know you're going to say, don't look at, I know, what do you call it?
Me too.
What do you call it?
Me three, there we go.
Yeah. And I suppose that is the thing, is that, that you do hear of people trying to get an exit when it's too late to start. So at least we've got plenty of time. And I think that's with employee ownership, is that it allows for that smooth transition. It's not a situation where you leave the next day. You can be here, and the expectation is that you're here long term to help the transition. And as much as we've done everything that we can think of in terms of employee well-being, it does require someone else to take on that mantle. Someone else needs to be grown from within the business to look after them into the future, and that has to be an insider. I can't see taking an outsider into the business that person would have the same cultural alignment with the rest of the people. So that's kind of why it's important as well.
So how long have you been thinking about this, and at what stage are you now? And also, in terms of the solicitors in JMK, what's their response been?
Well, we initially started to think about this a couple of years ago, as we were coming out of the pandemic, as a way of again the exit, but also the rewarding the people who have been there long term. And for a number of reasons, we got distracted off that plan. But it's never not been on the agenda, in the last couple of years. In relation to the staff, I think the initial concern that people have is about, well, what happens day to day? Are you disappearing? What effect does it have on my job? Do I have to take on all of the responsibilities as a director of a legal practice, which carries additional legal burdens, even more so than a company director? And it's trying to work on that mind shift, that people that understand that the business has as running the business has bigger obligations than individuals. You have to look for the whole team of people, and it's also the main reaction people have, I suppose, is do I have to give up the day job? Do I have to stop being a solicitor and acting for clients if I now have to be a director of the business?
Mm-hmm. And getting that balance right.
Yes. So what we're trying to get that across to people's, and it's going to take a bit of time, is to say, well, for some people, that might be what happens, but it's not a requirement. That that we're not. There will be plenty of people who will be phenomenal solicitors, but never be able to make that transition. And what I believe with the employee ownership model is they won't have to make that transition. They will still benefit from the future of the practice without having to take on those greater regulatory burdens, because someone else can be given that role and responsibility, and but everybody needs to be aligned in terms of the overall plan. Mm-hmm. So
even those that continue to do the job and, I suppose, please the clients and bring in the money, that they still feel that they, have that role to play, and they're not looked down on because they haven't maybe taken on the more managerial, strategic position.
Because that is what happens in a lot of businesses, is that people, for say the kudos of being an owner or a director, they take on a responsibility that they're actually not fit for, and or they're promoted into a position that they're not fit for, not comfortable with. That's and right. Then they underperform. And we're trying to say to people is don't worry about it. You don't have to take on that role if you want to.
It's change, though, isn't Jonathan? And it's change that we're not familiar with, because let's face it, there are very few companies currently in Northern Ireland that have adopted this new model, although there are at least 2,000, I believe, in the rest of the UK.
Yes, well, I think that's the other thing, is we would like to, I suppose, be part of. We're always been innovating in our business, and we kind of want to be part of a future thing where we're innovating again, where we are the entity that people look to in relation to that. So it came about with for example, the 4-day week.
I was just going to say, you've always been leading the way.
So that, we were one of the first companies to do that, and we didn't. But that took 2 years before we implemented that. That wasn't something that happened overnight. And I suppose with this, it'll be something similar. It'll take a bit of time for people to adjust and understand, and the I think the struggle with it is that when you give people the concept of it, some people will know better than others what you're trying to achieve, and it's making sure that everybody comes along at the same, and it's like no man left behind or no woman left behind.
But what happens if somebody doesn't want to change? Do they just choose then, I don't think this is for me anymore?
Well, I think that the way my understanding of the employee trust model is that they can opt out if they wish to not be part of the ownership, but what we would be saying to them is opt out if you like, but opt in at any time when you feel comfortable again, and don't, because it's a trust. You're not expected to take on any regulatory burden, and let's all work together and talk over time as to how we see things changing. But I suppose for me, the way I'm keen to move on with it is I don't want the staff to think that. That I'm leading them on a merry dance, that there's something that's going to happen and then not happen. I'd like to, to deliver on my promises. So that's why I'm keen to
involve them and bring them with you.
Yes, and I hope that, I hope, famous last words. We should have invited one of them to do another to see would they trust me on this. But that's where I think is that I hope that people would trust me, that they know that we've looked after them so far, that any changes that we're talking about are for their ultimate benefit, even if they don't necessarily understand from day one why it's a benefit. Mm-hmm.
And are you getting much help on this journey at the minute?
Well, we're starting the process, so we have communicated with a small number of the staff to explain it to them as to what we're going to do, and we're now starting the process of talking more to the staff about it so that they get to understand it. There is a regulatory issue that we have to deal with, is that the solicitors who staff members who aren't solicitors, we will have to deal with them in a different way because of the regulatory environment in Northern Ireland. But again, we will ensure that they know that they are not being disadvantaged in any way and they're being looked after. I think that's what's so important, is to make sure as a business we've always looked after all staff. In some businesses, the salespeople or the solicitors or the accountants would get looked after more than the admin staff, and we have not done that. We've always looked after everybody and respected everybody. So everybody in our business is a 4-day a week, for example. Everybody can do the homeworking, for example. We're not we're not discriminating against the solicitor, so it's really just keeping that going, that everybody understands that it's a big team. And just explain
that regulation in Northern Ireland.
So in Northern Ireland, which is different than the rest of the UK, a legal practice can only be owned by a Northern Ireland solicitor. So in that situation, the non-solicitors wouldn't be allowed to be part of the employee ownership. But we can create a different structure that allows them to benefit in another way outside of the business. There is actually other examples of this happening even in the Republic of Ireland. Just last week, it was announced that one of the large accountancy firms were doing something similar, and they were restructuring so that their audit business, which had to be regulated, that every person who was a partner in that would be an accountant, but in the non-audit business, every employee would be an owner. So it's something akin to that, where you separate out the regulated parts from the non-regulated parts and create a different structure. So it's probably a good idea that I have a legal practice that looks after corporate law issues.
Sure is, and that brings us very nicely to Gervase at the minute. You've lots of things to think about, and especially when you're one of the new people doing this, and you're kind of, precedent hasn't been set in various where Gervase can come in and look, well, let's see what everybody else is doing, because there are unique considerations in Northern Ireland. But Gervase, I suppose probably should have done this right at the very start, but can you start by explaining the employee ownership model and its legal framework in as simple terms as possible, please?
Well, employee ownership as a model simply means that the employees have a stake in the company. Typically, that would be through shares, but the idea behind it is that the model will foster a sense of responsibility and sort of deeper engagement for the staff in operating the business. And one of the ways in doing this was the employee ownership trust, and that was introduced in 2014 by the Finance Act. And before the EOT model, exits and succession planning would have followed a typical route where you would have had A business owner would pass the business to either their children or the next generation that had an interest. They'd sell the business perhaps to a trade buyer, sell it to investors, or there would be a management buyout. But with the employee ownership trusts, there was a fifth option, and that was essentially to sell the business to a trust which was created that had the employees as the beneficiaries. The employees were the owners of the business.
And what are the key legal steps then that a business must take when transitioning to this model?
Well, the first thing they need to do is assess the business to ensure that it's suitable for it. Planning, like any other form of corporate transaction, you need to plan exactly what you want to do, assess. You need to value the business. There has to be an agreed valuation, an independent valuation. You'll then need to agree on the corporate documents. There would need to be the trust deed, the terms, which would set out what the governance of the trust will be and the principles. The share purchase agreement, first and foremost, where the trust will buy the shares from the existing business owner and what those terms are, what will be paid. There need to be an understanding of how the transaction is going to be funded, whether it's going to be through external funding or whether the business owner will part fund it by way of granting loan notes, where the trust would essentially say they'll buy the shares by a specific amount on the date of completion or the date of transfer of the shares, and there will be an agreement to pay whatever the remaining value was given to the shares over a period of time. So that's essentially, there's a legal document called a loan note. And then there'll be other corporate documents involved. There's the usual corporate ancillary documents, board minutes, all the various different things that would apply in a usual, normal sort of acquisition transaction. So
it's not something that can be done overnight. It takes a lot of planning and sounds like it could be quite costly.
Yes and yes, in fairness. Nothing is cheap nowadays. I suppose it depends on each added level of complexity that would exist in the transaction, and the things that Jonathan has mentioned there for the particular circumstances relating to a law practice and Northern Ireland. Yes, that would add extra cost because you're looking to have to advise on a transfer of staff outside of the existing company. You're looking to ensure that there's regulatory compliance, which is another added layer where you're going to have to spend time considering each step and how to ensure that you're compliant. So where there are more steps and where there are more layers of complexity, there are obviously going to be more costs involved.
And with Granite Legal Services, is this something you're coming across more and more now?
Yes, in terms of the concept of employee ownership, though in fairness, we've looked at and advised in relation to the J&K situation, and that's the first, I suppose, we've had to look at in terms of considering the regulatory impact on the proposed transaction.
And Jonathan, back to you and just looking at this employee ownership model. I mean, it sounds brilliant. And I know you've talked about your goals being, yes, around exit, but also around employee engagement. And Gervase talked about that also. How do you think this model will boost the culture and boost that employee engagement?
Well, I think you said earlier about that most people don't think about their exit and start a business thinking about the exit, and I think that the same thing probably applies to the employees as well. They don't think about the exit, but what we're trying to do with it is to gently push everybody around to this idea of understanding that there is going to be an exit. So they are being given an opportunity with us to be part of that future and design the future. So that, I hope, encourages the people that we have to it is a bit, I suppose, raising up their own skill level as well, and their own sense of belonging to the firm. Is that they already act like they are the owners, and now we're saying, right, you're now part of this additional future of it, and you can design it the way you want it to be. It's, my exit's not going to be overnight, as you mentioned. It's going to be a number of years, so we can work together to transition that, and that they know that this is going to happen, is happening, and I will be out and they'll be in.
How does this fit with your personal leadership style, would you say?
I don't know if I've got a good style. I think I spoke on a previous podcast about my father describing himself as a benign dictator, and I'm not sure if I'm even benign half the time. but I don't think I'm a dictator. I do have fixed views on a lot of things. This is how I think things should work. But I'm generally good at allowing other people to get on board with that and catch up with me in the in terms of working things out for themselves. But that is a key issue that we're going to have to deal with as we go forward, because as we've got bigger as a business, my ability to lead the people on the ground has definitely suffered a lot. This year in particular has been an incredibly busy year, and I haven't been as engaged frontline with people as I used to be. And I certainly want to use this process to find the next person to take on that leadership mantle and be in the front face of the business. Not just out external, but certainly internal, so that the people have someone to look to, and that doesn't happen with me just disappearing one day. That there's a transition and someone else takes that up, because that is important to lead people through to the next stage.
And that's it as well, that you build successful, not just one business, but several businesses. But you do, and you want to be involved with all of it, and you can't be. How stressful is that? Well,
I think this year has been, on paper, one of the best years we've ever had, but it's actually one of the most stressful years we've ever had. And I think that's another reason why I suppose we want to look at this transition as well, to say, look, there are things which are taking up so much of my energy and time, and my other directors' energy and time, that's away from frontline services. So we're going to have to extricate ourselves from what we were doing and say to the rest of the people, look, you can trust us to look after these bits, but you're now going to have to take over these other bits that we were doing before. And again, doing it on the basis that they know they're being rewarded for it. It's not a pretend reward. It's not a long finger or something that may or may not happen. It's going to happen, and that they
and the more successful that the business is, the more that the employees benefit. Is that
exactly
correct?
Well, that's it. Because once you go through the transition stage, then any future value accrues to the staff, not to the seller. So one thing that Gervase mentioned about the staff having an interest or a meaningful interest in the business, in order to qualify for the tax incentives, the employees have to have over 50% of the shareholding of the business. They can be, if they have 25%, they can be an employee-owned business. But for the tax issues, it's over 50%, and we're still working that out as to whether or not we would start off with the 50%, so that people see, we are really in this together now. And that would be again a way of making sure people understand that they're not being abandoned, but they're going to have to grow.
Absolutely. And we're doing this together. I think a previous guest, Rebecca from White Ink Architects, said it's about not the me, it's the we.
Yes.
We're moving forward together.
Yes, well, Rebecca is a fantastic person. I've seen her at a few events now, and her passion for it really is what we're trying to get with our people, is that we have people who are actively engaged in their job and they're very motivated, but you can see with Rebecca that little bit extra edge, that they're saying, I can achieve more because it is for me and the benefit of all my colleagues. It's not one person or two people who are benefiting. We're all benefiting this, and that statement she says about think about we, not think about me, or whatever, is phenomenal. It's a brilliant way to encapsulate it.
And she also then gets to maybe hold the directors to account. So they, you know, she's on the board now. She's still operating as an architect and being creative and doing her brilliant work for her clients, but it's given her a whole new purpose and meaning and sense of what it is to be part of that organisation.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and Karen McGuire, who you've also interviewed, you know, she was explaining recently the issues that she's had to deal with, and I haven't listened to her podcast now. I don't know if I'm spoiler alert, but but certainly she was explaining the issues of post transition. That there's a lot of things to do, so it's not a situation where you just do it one day and you forget about it. It's a constant it's constant working, and for me it's understanding that with the staff say this is going to be a constant thing that's going to evolve, but you're getting the upside.
Yeah, absolutely. That's Karen McGuire, the founder of Relinia. So we do have a special podcast all talking to Karen about the pros and the cons, but definitely the pros outweigh the cons. It's just because it's been so new for her, and not having the other examples either side of her. There was only White Ink with the only other company at the time, so it's still so new. Well, let's come back to Gervase then. And if anybody's listening to this now, Gervase, and maybe they've already looked at this model and thought, I wonder, is that for me? What best practices would you recommend for businesses considering employee ownership from the legal standpoint?
Well, I think the best practices apply not only from the legal standpoint, but first of all is to educate yourself on what employee ownership is and, how it works structurally. And then, as I said before, the key to anything is planning. You plan what you're going to do, and so that you understand that everything's taken one step at a time. You would, I suppose, as a professional advisor, I'd suggest you engage professional advisors at an early stage. People who know what they're talking about, people who've done it before. Certainly the first time I looked at this, we engaged with professional advisors. I think you've already had Andrew on the podcast, and he was very useful for us in terms of explaining his involvement. Communication is key. Understand, set out and have a comms plan for senior people within the business from an early stage, and then for the wider business. And I suppose aligned with your comms plan is your general approach to employee engagement for each step that you need to take. Training and support. There are a number of good organisations out there, including the Employee Ownership Association, which is based over in GB, and that's one that I joined. When looking at that, they have a wealth of resources to tap into, and can you point you in the right direction to people to speak to. So, the legal aspect of it is only one small part of this in reality. The transactional documents are transactional documents, but it's essentially a project that you need to plan how you're going to assess, implement, monitor, and over time adapt as necessary to make sure it's successful.
Yes, and if you do that planning and that preparation, then you would say that EOT is a good move?
Absolutely, I would. Yeah, absolutely.
And you are advising others out there. You can assist with all of that now, and you're working alongside Jonathan very closely too, so you're kind of living and breathing it at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Jonathan, your long-term vision then for JMK Solicitors, and then if it goes well, would you look at maybe rolling it out across the other business?
Oh, absolutely. That would be the intention. I sort of imagine that JMK is going to be the trickier business to move into, so that's kind of why I have picked it first to do it on. But we also, we have as a business. We say we have a lot of motivated staff. This is an exciting project for them. We want to keep them motivated. We want to look for how we continue to attract more staff to us, for people to see that we are different. I think, again, post-pandemic, a lot of people have disengaged from their businesses and from their employers. The home working has made people, think more about life and doing things differently. And what we would want to do is to make sure that we are ahead of the game in that we are attracting people who might be disengaged other places, but who want to come to something that's exciting, that is genuinely something that is going to work in their favour for the future, that we're part of a plan for how we operate a legal services business that meets the demands of our clients, because that's all changing rapidly as well. We have obviously with the new generation of people coming through, I'm having this issue now where my children know things that I will never know. And I remember in my house it was the video recorder that in the 80s I could work the video when they couldn't. And now in our house I don't even know what there is that I don't know. They haven't even told me what the things are.
50-year-olds really, I don't know.
So I think that's kind of where we do see that advantage as well, is that we'll be able to bring younger people into the business quicker, who can tell us that this is what we need to be doing to connect with people.
And do you see this as being good for recruitment? Do you think that people will look at this when they're going to apply for a job with you and go, I like the sound of that. I like that control and that element of I can benefit from this as well and grow this company.
Absolutely, because we have that. A lot of staff that we've recruited in the last number of years has come from our own staff recommending us to other friends and colleagues, and we want to continue to work on that, because I say we are an exciting business. We're continuing to grow, and that requires more staff to be able to handle that and engage staff as we get bigger. The ability to engage staff will be harder. So that's why we want to make sure that everybody has an extra reason to be engaged and to want the best for their colleagues as well as their clients.
Now, Gervase has outlined how important preparation and planning is when you're considering this move to an EOT. But I wonder, would you have any advice to anyone? You're a little bit along the road now. Would you have anybody listening to this?
The thing is, I read a lot of the business magazines and things like that, and you hear the horror stories of people selling their business, and the due diligence process becomes very unwieldy, and they have difficulties trying to do due diligence in secret, because they don't want their staff to find out. But that causes problems, that they're hiding stuff from their employees, and employees are smart enough to know when something's been being kept from them. So I think the advantage with this is that with this process is it's a much more friendly or collaborative process, and people will be able to look at their own their own employees and say, yeah, I can see how we can move this forward, or we can have conversations over a longer period of time so that people understand, yeah, this is what's going to happen, and here's how it's good for you, and you be part of the plan for how we put it in place. And the exit, it's unfortunate, I don't want to sound make a negative comment when I'm talking about something that's so positive, but the reality is, yes, what do you call it, the business I have to exit the business, so we better just get on with that and say that's what's happening. So let's get, there's no just acknowledge the fact, and then let's work to make sure it transitions smoothly for everybody, because everybody wants long-term secure employment, and our clients want to know that they've got their transaction in the hands of someone who's going to be around the long term, and is going to answer their phone calls, and is going to do everything they can for them, even on the days when we're stressed out and very busy. So that's kind of where I do see that the engagement of employees, and so retention of employees and recruitment of new employees being very important.
And in terms of that legacy then, because it's so important when you set up your business, you don't want it all to just end overnight and somebody else comes in and that's it, it's gone. But what you're doing is you're growing it from the ground up and then letting it fly.
Well, exactly. And the other thing that we have in our documents that we've created for this is that whilst there's going to be a requirement for financial targets to be met, in any business you set a budget and you hope to make the target. What's so important for us in our business is our mission, vision, and core values, which we talk about with our staff all the time, and keeping those core values in place is what's going to be important for the long term, and that becomes as important as the general keeping on top of the finances. And I think that's when you sell to a stranger, you don't have that ability to do that. And I think it would, you talk about the legacy, it would embarrass me if my name was sullied by someone who changed things to the degree that we didn't look after the clients the way we always wanted to.
So you're not fearing that relinquishing control?
No, not at all. No, not at
Bring
all.
it on.
Bring it on. Abdicate. I'll abdicate as quick as possible. But I get the emails regularly from the review sites about, and it's not my name that's being mentioned. It is the individual solicitors are being mentioned. So they are leading the business. They are the face of it as far as the clients are concerned. And all we're talking about now doing is giving them the extra reward for that. That they know that they didn't do it just for me. It was great that they did for 20 years, but now they can do it for themselves.
For themselves, together.
Yes.
Amazing. And Gervase, anyone listening here, I'm sure if they needed any advice, they could come to you?
Absolutely. It's up until 3 years ago, this was fairly new stuff for us, but we've been living and breathing it for 3 years. So I think we're well qualified and well positioned to give advice for any businesses out there interested in the concept and the transition.
So do get in touch with Granite Legal Services if you are interested. Well, thank you so much, and I wish you all the best for the future. And maybe you'll come back in a year, 2 years. How long do you think it'll take?
Well, I think that in terms of putting it in place, I'd say that's about 6 months. But
Right.
the implementation of it and seeing how it's working, that's another couple of years just to see how that goes. But I think it's one of those things you just have to see what happens.
Well, watch this space, and maybe we'll be back. Hopefully, we'll all be back, and we can see how it went.
Yes.
Yeah, fabulous. Well, thank you so much to Jonathan McKeown, founder and chairman of JMK Solicitors, also Granite Legal Services, CEO of Crash Services and founder of Granite Exchange, alongside Gervase McGenity, Director of Business Law in Granite Legal Services. And I hope you've all enjoyed this special 5-part series where we've been taking a deep dive into the world of employee ownership trusts. I think that's something we're going to be hearing a lot more of in the years to come. This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service, where our team using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.